You want it, you need it, you've got to have it. And guess what? I am here to satisfy your carnal need in terms of all these court reports. We got a 2-for-1 deal for you today. We're talking about Solomon versus Zero Dark Tony, as well as Danny in his restraining order case against Philip Campo. Went to Solomon's case, but interestingly enough, did not go to Danny's. I certainly wanted to. I was available to do so. His attorney actually asked me not to attend. Bit of a strange situation, and we'll talk more into detail about that. But first, we'll start with a simpler case, which is, of course, Solomon versus Zero Dark Tony. Long story short, Solomon is attempting to get a restraining order against Zero Dark Tony for a myriad of really lewd, perverted, outrageously disgusting threats of violence, threats of rape, threats of sexual assault that Tony has blasted out towards Solomon. This includes via online, in print, in text, as well as trying to rattle him and ride around Solomon's general presence in his flitty scooter. So that was an interesting case, and what Zero Dark Tony was hoping for is he thought perhaps the judge would look at this, see a 16-year-old kid, maybe he seems like he was a little much, and essentially dismiss the case and feel that there was no cause. Or if nothing else, at least dismiss the case without prejudice, which means that it could be tried again, but you have to go through the entire process and start it up again, which means that this whole case, instead of being delayed maybe by a month with a continuance, would be delayed by an entire 6, 7, 8 months. To dismiss a case, even dismissing it with the notion that you're gonna talk about it again, or that you have every right to resume it, you don't want that to happen, because then that just kicks the can down the road and Tony is essentially successful. So the result is Solomon got a continuance. Was it a stalemate? I wouldn't necessarily say so. I would say it was a slight victory for Solomon. Of course, Solomon was just hoping that Tony would be considered served or granted, and that necessarily wasn't the case. So the judge wanted to ask about details. What specific threats did Zero Dark Tony make towards Solomon, of which there were many. One of them, he said he was going to beat Solomon up the moment he turns 18. He threatened to rape his mother. A myriad of really lewd things that make it even more lewd when you're talking about somebody who is under 18 years old. Just disgusting talk. And one of the other things that Tony was hoping for is that this case would be thrown into mediation. Obviously, Tony was not there, so that is not going to happen if he's actively avoiding it. The judge tried to put some guff onto Solomon, being like, well, why hasn't Tony responded? Solomon was very good on the stand, very deft, very intelligent, and quickly responded, being like, well, there's no way to really reach him. He makes these daily posts, so he is obviously reachable, and he has admitted himself, and he has quoted on his community page that he will actively not show up, that he's essentially thwarting the court, thwarting that process, doesn't respect it, doesn't take it seriously, and that he will not even show up. So Tony, by bragging and talking about how this is so frivolous and ridiculous and stupid, he shot himself in the foot, because he exhibited his blatant disrespect to the court and the court process, which of course, after Solomon put that on the table, the judge certainly took that into account. So the judge was, for a while with this back and forth, she admonished Solomon for not having Tony's direct emails. Solomon mentioned at the end that he thinks that the zerodarktony@gmail.com is his direct email, although he's not sure. And the lawyer did try to give him admonishment that he never emailed Tony before, and perhaps he should have put more effort into actually finding out ways to reach him. Of course, Solomon quickly retorted with a public message, among many other things, that Zero Dark Tony is essentially unreachable. The judge asked specifically, did Solomon do anything to try to find him? Because he kept trying to admonish Solomon for essentially not putting that effort. Solomon did mention that he knows Zero Dark Tony, even though he doesn't know his address, which complicates things, lives in the vicinity of Hollywood Boulevard, the vicinity of the Scientology Center, And he did try to ask neighbors, people that he knew him, where exactly he might have been. And then he spent a number of hours doing that. So when you put a number of hours of effort into trying to find the right contact info for this person, and you still are not successful in doing so, well, then guess what? That would give the judge a reasonable thought to assume that Solomon put a good amount of effort into actually finding Zero Dark Tony's information. So him not showing up didn't really help in that regard if you were Zero Dark Tony. Not at all. But the judge did try to say, well, maybe this should be dismissed. And I always get with and without prejudice confused. I believe this could be dismissed without prejudice, meaning that it could be tried again. And the reason the judge mentioned that is because Solomon also mentioned that his mother had gotten threats and was a victim of Zero Dark Tony's harassment and verbal abuse, and that he's even called her workplace and a number of pretty egregious stuff. Unfortunately, that worked against them because the judge said, well, this is about Solomon, this is not you. So the judge must say, well, if you have all this stuff and this isn't involving Solomon, then, well, maybe we should dismiss the case. That would have given Tony somewhat of a substantive victory because, again, it would have taken probably an additional 6, 7, 8 months to actually get to where we are right now. What ended up happening is that the judge is giving Solomon about 2 months to actively try to connect with him, get his contact info before he got served. Here's the other good news. There's enough evidence in this restraining order where it did not get dismissed, meaning that the restraining order is valid, it is granted, it still stands. The only thing we're worrying about is to actually potentially serve Zero Dark Tony. If there's so much of an effort and he doesn't get served, as has happened in the case of David Miscavige in the bigger Scientology case, then he will be considered served. And hopefully after the 2 months, my guess is if Zero Dark Tony does not respond, then officially he would be considered served at that upcoming court case, which is, I think I said 2 months. I'm incorrect about that. Forgive me for my information. That is actually July 18th, I believe. But I'll add all of these dates. I have them all written down as well. So Solomon did a great job, and his mother was there to support him and also did a great job in exhibiting the specific threats, exhibiting how she's lost some income, some respect in her job, some of her livelihood because of the hostility of Tony going out of his way and connecting with people, calling child protective services even, and generally just being quite nasty. So I would say it would be a mild victory for Solomon. What would have been very nice is the judge says, I've heard enough. You did try to connect with Tony in this last month, and he is now considered served. But she does not know a lot about Scientology, you could tell, and she was a little skeptical of Solomon, I could tell in the beginning, and not completely respectful, but again, Solomon was pretty poised, well focused on the stance, and was able to kind of flip her opinion, so she understood the harassment that Solomon had received. But this is going to be focused, this next case is going to be focused merely on Solomon and not on his mother, though his mother and other family members are also put in as part of their restraining order in some regard, although they're not the official givers of the restraining order. That would only be Solomon. So that was, yes, the judge dismissed the case without prejudice. And there's a back and forth conversation. Solomon said he thinks he might have his email, but not necessarily. And this was also a good thing that Solomon remarked, is that Tony could be gotten in touch with because he responds to his community comments and he makes posts every single day on his community page, which means that Zero Dark Tony most likely is aware of, and well, he admitted he's aware, right, which was helpful, that Zero Dark Tony is aware of this case. So some claim some people might make is, let's say you're living in the middle of the mountains and you're a Sherpa and you've had no internet for 7 years, you might not be aware that there's a restraining order. But any claim, Sherpa-like claim, that Zero Dark Tony would try to make is not legitimate because he's been posting his community, he's been posting that he's aware of the court case, and he has posted as recently as the morning before. So he's not in medical duress, he is not up in the mountains, he is not uncontactable. So I would say congratulations to Solomon, and too bad we don't have a result, but hey, what else is new? We rarely ever do. But again, the result of this, even though we kick the can down the road, it still breeds optimism. So I think it is guaranteed Solomon, the restraining order is granted, it's guaranteed, I think, at the next court case that Solomon will be considered served. But of course, I will be there for you to talk about it. So we talked about Solomon. Let's talk about the skeeting scooter man, Philip Campo, versus, of course, famously of Danny and Leah. One of the most chill, venerable, likable, relaxed protesters. Very odd that he would be considered a man capable of assaulting another man. Another long story short, you guys have probably seen the videotape, but if you would like me to just go over real quickly, this specific incident all stems from when Danny was trying to walk through on L. Ron Hubbard Way outside of the Blue Building. There was a man with a scooter blocking his path. Danny said, "Hey, could you excuse me, please?" The guy wouldn't move. So Danny tries to get around him. "Okay, if you're not going to move, you're just going to stand in one spot, I'll move around you." Then the guy takes his scooter and thrashes him very clearly. And yet somehow, and the police let this happen, perhaps because of their connection and friendship with Scientology, somehow Mr. Campo uses this as evidence to get a restraining order against Danny. Obviously, complete and total bullshit. Now here's the scary part. Well, I'll first tell you the result. The result is there's merely a continuance. Here's the scary part. I wanted to show up and cover this case. Danny's lawyer told me that he did not want me to do so because I'm, of course, openly connected or openly supportive, and I've gone out and protested myself with the Los Angeles protesters. He said that any information about the protesters, any egregious acts that they might have done, will all be looped together to be used as evidence against Danny. And so that he wants to paint Danny as an independent figure separate from any of the protesters because their misdeeds would somehow labyrinthianly be pinned on Danny in this case. Now, in reality, if you examine the evidence, irrelevant. What not that I'm saying anybody has done anything bad, but if you try to make an argument, what Aja has done, what Tony the King has done, or whatever the hell his name is, Matt, anybody else, what DOA has done. Again, not that DOA and Aja have done anything bad, but for people who are a little more vocal, whatever, they'll try to pick apart that evidence and use it. That's not relevant. Whatever they have done does not play in to Danny's court case. So it almost seems bizarre. Now, how did Danny get this lawyer? William, Streets LA, wanted Danny to use his lawyer. Of course, she is a hell of a lot more expensive. She was $10,000 versus Danny's current lawyer is $6,000. The lawyer seemed to be over paranoid. He wanted Danny to take a plea that would involve Moxon in that conversation. Of course, Kendrick Moxon, a famous Scientology person. Kendrick Moxon is advocating for Philip. Philip is openly a Scientologist. Before, the Scientologists would get all these independent people and say they have nothing to do with Scientology. They're probably just running out of crazy guys to pay off, right? So Philip is an open Scientologist, and Kendrick Moxon, again, the guy involved in the Lisa McPherson wrongful death case, as well as somebody named in intimidating witnesses in the Leah Remini case and telling a witness who was caught trying to clip a security guard with his car that he was inspired to anger by the Aftermath television show. So that whole case, Kendrick Moxon is the guy that tried to convince him to do it. So our good friend is yet again involved. What else is new? But it was an odd situation. And then the other claim that Danny's attorney made is that Danny, helicopter going by, hopefully you can still hear me. Danny has roots in immigration, so he could potentially get deported. The lawyer said that if all of this evidence, the so-called evidence of nefarious actions, as he even said to me, of nefarious actions on the other protesters' part, apply to Danny, well, then Danny would get the TRO, and the TRO would have Danny get deported from the country as if they were living in Midland, Texas. Guys, newsflash, Los Angeles and California, they're not going to deport you for a temporary restraining order. Temporary restraining order is not necessarily criminal. It's a different statute. Los Angeles is very reticent and very apprehensive to throw out and deport immigrants who do far more severe crimes than assaulting a man with a scooter. You know, you get deported perhaps if you're on trial for homicide. That would get you deported. But even if you're on trial for probably possessing heroin or something more minor like that, or shoplifting, whatever, which are all much worse than even what Danny's accused of course, which are false accusations, you're not going to get deported. You all got to look at jurisdictions. That's not Gavin Newsom, whether you agree with them or disagree with them, and I'm going to go down to the border, so we'll have a conversation about that. He was hoping that Danny was not informed about politics and would just be so fearful that he'd be deported that he would accept the plea deal. Luckily, Danny had his friends here to talk him off the ledge, because Danny was close to accepting the plea deal. Streets got in his ear. Street said, hey, you should probably still use my attorney. So guys, we're going to make another fundraising push for Danny. I think I have to double check his link, his fundraising link. I think it is in the ether, so it will be added to the description. So please donate to Danny, especially after Danny made the correct decision, and it looks like he is going to find alternative counsel, perhaps a more objective counsel. And I hate to shout conspiracy, guys. I hate to shout conspiracy, but you do wonder. Scientology keeps losing their cases. First, they couldn't get the protesters off. So, because they had to let them protest, and they were actually effective, and they're bringing down the numbers and the recruitment of Scientology. They couldn't do that. So what's step 2? Pick them off, one by one. Forever ban them from Scientology. Ban the leaders. Now, Aja, of course, has an upcoming restraining order, of which I'll be attending. Well, guess what? You put all of that in front of a court of law, restraining order gets thrown out. Look at what happened with DOA and a lot of different other ones. So, what's the third option that you could potentially take? Third option is, do you try to infiltrate the lawyer advising the client? Do you try to infiltrate the lawyer advising the protester, the guy who is against you? I don't know how they do it, but I wouldn't be shocked. And I have to do some more research as to how Danny... Oh, I'll tell you how Danny connected with this. So here's the last bit of, some may call me shouting conspiracy, but it's food for thought. 86 GOP, you remember him. I, unfortunately, did not get in time to suck from the teat of 86 GOP, which is regrettable, but many people got to do so. And it seemed like it was great that he was initially helping. Obviously, he has exhibited a lot of control and has wanted to very aggressively control the messaging and the process of the protesters, when perhaps he would have been very out of line to try and do so. So he was paying, and he's been a mega donor for all these protests. He was paying for the attorney of Danny. Here's where this gets really weird, guys. Even though he was paying for the attorney, it gets complicated. Even though 86 GOP was paying for Danny's attorney told Danny that quotes said by GOP, 86 GOP, the specific quote saying we're going to burn down the Scientology building, can and would be used against Danny. So the guy funding the lawyer, that lawyer, because the guy is paying for it, the guy, 86 GOP directly gave Danny's attorney money. Danny's attorney does a 360 and says, hey, you know that guy that just gave me money? Well, he's going to lose the case for you. That's bizarre, isn't it? And you think you wouldn't want to piss off the guy who's giving you money, unless, of course, there might be an order from on high to tangle everything up and have your client actually lose the case. So this inflammatory comment, this direct threat, we're going to burn down the Scientology building. Again, Danny's attorney said, dude, let's just accept a plea with Moxon, because this is a direct threat and that'll make you look bad. Because the exact words, because I got to, sorry if he's watching this, by the way, I got to speak with, and he seemed like a nice guy to me, but I got to speak with Danny's attorney, And he said that they're going to try to, and maybe there's some accuracy in this, but it seems bizarre, that they're going to try to pinpoint the protesters as a direct criminal enterprise. Of course, if you're a criminal enterprise, you could all be charged together and you could be put on RICO. So he said he was worried that Danny would be part of what has been tagged by some as this criminal enterprise, therefore be susceptible to RICO charges. And even if he wasn't, the fact that he had a TRO and that the 86 GOP quote would affirm the TRO, that he would be deported. Bizarre, 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 bizarre. Danny seemed stressed, but he also seemed like he dodged a bullet. He seemed like he was kind of shaken up. I asked Danny, I said, can I say all this? I don't want to hurt his case. And Danny said, yes, certainly. But yeah, again, man, and again, I wasn't allowed in, or his attorney requested that I not show up, because then they'd associate him, Danny, with the protesters, of which some are saying is a criminal enterprise. Talk about a stretch if there ever was one. So, at this point, guess what? Continuance! Shocker. So, we will be there to talk about that down the road. And I ain't getting much sleep because tomorrow we got DOA. I got to chat with him. So, we're going to cover that. I'll see you bright and early tomorrow morning. Link for Danny is going to be up. And guys, we need to make a big push so he gets the counsel that he needs, because he's woken up. Thank God Streets was there to kind of rein him in. And thank God, because Streets knows the legalese. And if Danny isn't following obsessively like I am about politics and comparing the immigration policies of Newsom versus Abbott, then how are you going to know all this shit, right? So thank God Streets was here. Danny is on a good path. So some hiccups, some delays, but ultimately for both members, optimism, optimism, optimism. So we will fight on, and I will see you tomorrow. Thanks for waiting and thanks for watching. Please do subscribe and donate to Danny. Take care. Bye-bye.